those or not. All right, we're in Ecclesiastes chapter 10 this morning as we continue on our task through this book. There's only 12 chapters, so we've only got this chapter and 2 more, and then we'll have it wrapped up. You guys will know everything about everything under the sun.
Chapter 10.
Chapter 10. Chapter 10. And we're going to start reading at verse 4 through verse 7, and then we'll have a word of prayer and go from there. Ecclesiastes 10, beginning of verse 4. If the spirit of the ruler rises up against thee, leave not thy place, for yielding pacifieth great offenses. There is an evil which I have seen under the sun, an error which proceedeth from the ruler. Folly is set in great dignity, and the rich sit in low place. I have seen servants upon horses, and princes walking as servants on the earth. All right, let's have a word of prayer, and we'll dig into this morning. Father, we thank you because you're so gracious to us. We thank you for the way you provided for us through this week. And we ask that as we set a table before the saints, that you should feed us with the good manna of heaven. Strengthen our hearts, make us wise in spiritual things. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, I've entitled verses 4 through 7 as rulers are often fools. We've never seen that in our life where we've had a president or somebody that was a fool. No, I can think of one, at least the last administration. Anyways, moving on now. It says in verse 7, if the spirit of the ruler rise up against thee, leave not thy place, for yielding pacifieth great offenses. We've never had a boss get mad at us, have we? None of us have never experienced an angry boss. No one. I think we all have, because we're all men, and bosses sometimes can get quite angry. It talks about a ruler, so someone who is obviously in authority over you, whether it be governmental or some civil capacity, a magistrate, a chief ruler, somebody who is obviously over us, because being a ruler implies that we are not, correct? So whatever the situation is, here is the spirit of a ruler riseth up against thee. So you are the object of his anger. You're the object of whatever it is that has upset him. He is looking at you, whether justified or not, whether his anger is justified or not, or whether you are justly being reprimanded. That's not the question at all, but rather is what is your response to it? Because a ruler can be foolish. Can he not? Can he not be angry but foolish in his anger? In other words, it's not justified, and maybe he's just a boss that just wants to exert himself and prove that he is in authority over you, and so they tend to be overbearing and very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very kingly in a sense, and dictate to you certain things. But anyways, it says, the spirit of the ruler rises up against thee, leave not thy place. Something has caused his anger to arise. He's become furious with you. Your sudden withdrawal is not advised. In other words, what is the first thing when somebody becomes angry with you, especially if we don't feel it's justified, yet it might be, what's the first thing we are going to do? We are going to react to that anger, are we not? Does it not make us angry as well? Do we not feel like responding and defending ourselves? And even if we are wrong, isn't it a natural inclination to defend ourselves? The reason why I did this, which was so wrong in your eyes, was because, and we want to justify ourselves. are subject to him. Don't run out of the room. The first thing we want to do is stomp our feet, run out, because we don't have to put up with that. We don't have to be talked to that way. That's wrong. They shouldn't do that. They shouldn't treat me that. They shouldn't accuse me. They shouldn't. Whatever is anger, it's unjustified. You stomp out of the room. That usually doesn't end well. Usually not the answer to this situation. What does the scripture say? I think I would go by what scripture say, other than what your personal opinion is about it, wouldn't you? Shouldn't we? So he says, whatever the cause is, whatever causes him to get angry, don't get angry yourself and stomp off in rebellion against this officer, this ruler, this king, this boss, if you will. Don't go stomping off, because only that will end badly. Stomping off in anger, getting mad at the situation, getting angry, is not a good way to respond. Because he said, I have seen, I forgot where it was, if the spirit of the ruler rise up against thee, leave not thy place. In other words, remember what your position is in relationship to his. You are and him are not equals in that place of business or in that civil position. He is over you. What is your position? Remember that. For yielding pacifieth great offenses. Humility, quietness, yielding, wisdom will go a long way in resolving and diffusing the anger. Anger usually comes up suddenly and then just about as quickly dissipate. When you stomp off, when you get angry, guess what? It keeps his anger inflamed. How dare you, when I'm your boss, stomp off and walk out of the room? How dare you, as your boss, that you talk back to me? All you do is just excite more anger and frustrate that one that's in authority over you even greater. That's not the answer. But humility, which is yielding, pacifieth great offense. So whatever the offense is, humility, quietness. There's a lot of people who want to give others a piece of their mind, right? That's not what you do for your boss. You ever heard the saying that, that about those who give a piece of their mind show how little mind they actually have? Quietness, yielding, and wisdom in those situations will go a long way to resolving, not just resolving, because it may just be a matter of resolving it, and there may be a way to resolve it, or at least to diffuse the anger. In Proverbs 15:1 says, a soft answer turneth away wrath. Does that sound like a diffusing of it, of the situation? Does that sound like a dissipating of it? But grievous words stir up anger. So when you respond in kind, in anger, the same way that they have approached you, it says that grievous words stir up anger. So all you're going to do is inflame the anger that your boss may already have, or the magistrate may already have. It says the tongue of the wise useth knowledge aright, the mouth of fools poureth out foolishness. A wise person learns to control their tongue and know when it's appropriate to speak and when it's not appropriate to speak. And not only that, when it's appropriate to speak, to be careful with the tone and the words that they use in relationship to the person that they are speaking to. So we need to be very careful. And it tells us here that we're going to find ourselves sometimes in places where there's that in regard of the oath of God, be not hasty to go out of his sight, stand not in an evil thing, for he doeth whatsoever he pleaseth. In other words, it tells us in our text that when he rises up against us, not to leave our place, not to leave the room. Verse 3 here of chapter 8 says, be not hasty to go out of his sight, stand not in an evil thing, for he doeth whatsoever he pleaseth. That is the king. So we need to be careful. Bearing his anger patiently, submitting to his displeasure quietly, making no returns either in words or in expression, or at least giving a soft answer and behaving ourselves very modestly and in a humble manner, and in the time of his wrath, it will subside, it will withdraw, it will go away, and he will be pacified. So, a foolish man isn't going to react that way. He's going to speak harshly, or withdraw himself, stomp out of the room, and he will definitely find himself in a more difficult position. If the spirit of the ruler rise up against thee, leave not thy place, for yielding pacifieth great expense. And he says, there is an evil which I have seen under the sun, as an error which proceedeth from the ruler. There is an evil I've seen under the sun. The preacher speaks of an evil, a calamity, a harmful thing that results from the ruler that makes an error in judgment. When a ruler makes an error in judgment, it is trouble. How does an error in judgment in the case of a ruler cause calamity? How does it cause this evil that it speaks of here in verse 5? There is an evil. How does it create that? What can you do? Well, a bad decision or an error in judgment affects everyone that the king rules over, or the president rules over, or I'm losing my mind. Anyways, it affects everyone in his kingdom, everyone in his country, his foolishness. It can lead to economic ruin, can it not? If he makes a bad decision there, can it not affect how the economy is going to go throughout the rest of his kingdom, or in the rest of this, like in the United States here? It might be that the poor decision he makes might be the cause of war. He may treat somebody foolishly, and therefore incite problems within his own kingdom. Jeroboam, everybody remember who Jeroboam is? He was the one who came to be king after Solomon. And he asked advice from the council of the older men, the wiser men, who Solomon had taken counsel from. And they gave him good counsel on what he should do in taking care of his kingdom. But Jeroboam forsook the advice and the wise counsel of these older men, and he listened to some younger, more foolish men, and took their advice. And as a result, the kingdom of Israel was divided. 10 tribes, the majority of Israel, went north, and then all that was left in Judea there, in Jerusalem, was Judah and the tribe of Benjamin. 10 tribes separated from the two. In 2 Samuel 24:10, David numbered the people. God had told him not to number the people, but he sent out one of his captains, and they went out and numbered the people. It even smote the heart of the captain. I can't remember his name, but he gave the report back to David because David wanted to number how many were in the land of Israel who were fighting men. And in 2 Samuel 24:10 it says, "And David's heart smote him after he had numbered the people. And David said unto the Lord, I have sinned greatly in that O Lord, take away the iniquity of thy servant, for I have done very foolishly. And then the Lord gave him some choices as to what he should do, what he could do as far as punishment is concerned. David left it up to the Lord, verse 15. So the Lord sent a pestilence upon Israel from the morning even to the time appointed. And there died of the people from Dan even to Beersheba 70,000 men. So because David sinned, made a foolish decision, it cost the lives of 70,000 Israelites. So a king can make very poor decisions. There is an evil I have seen under the sun, an error which proceedeth from the ruler. And then he goes and says, folly is set in great dignity, and the rich sit in low places. This is most unnatural. This is not something that you're supposed to see. The silly and the foolish being set in a place of honor. Doesn't seem right, does it? You guys are so quiet this morning. Are you all here? It is a most unnatural thing that folly should be found where there is supposed to be a place of great dignity. Being set in a place of honor, of dignity, is of great concern to who rules over. And somebody who is set in that position, who's really foolish, dishonors the office in which they hold, don't they? I mean, one of the highest offices to be held in the land that is known as the United States is the presidency. And that is a great office that is a office of great dignity and of great authority. But in my opinion, and probably in yours, the last administration had a fool sitting in that office. And who he had for advisors were fools. And we opened up our borders. And we have been, as the United States, been greatly defrauded in our finances. Things that are so horrible. Yet a man that was a fool sat in the office. And the dignity that was there, he lost. Respect, he lost. He lost his mind. I think I can fairly say that. And it was such a disgraceful thing to see these things. And it was public. You could watch it on TV and see the things that were being done and the way it was being acted. And the fact that he couldn't find himself and direct his own life. Somebody had to direct him to off the stages and on the stage. And he said things that were so horrible and ridiculous that it was terrible that such a person should sit in such a high place. Folly is set in great dignity. And the rich I lost my place. And the rich sit in the low place. The noble, on the other hand, the rich generally indicates their nobility. They are set in lower places. They are abundantly qualified in wisdom and knowledge and the estate, their mental abilities for the administration of government. They are wise men, but they're taken and they're set off in obscurity. They're not looked to for advice. They're not looked to for help. They're put aside and put in low places where they could have been a great help to that king or to that one who was holding a place of dignity, a high office. All he's set in great dignity. That's a terrible thing to see foolishness set in such a high office, and yet those who are able to help Those who would even qualify for that high office are set off and in obscurity. And then we saw, even in this country, we saw the weaponization of the legal system to try and destroy individuals who were of high dignity and those who were noble in many ways. Proverbs 19:10, delight is not seemly for a fool, much less for a servant to have rule over princes. A servant should not be ruling over kings and princes, should they? A servant is supposed to be what? Servant. He is lower than the prince and the king. In fact, he goes on here in the next verse and says, I have seen servants upon horses and princes walking as servants upon the earth. Something that is quite unnatural. Something that should not be. A servant sitting in the saddle of the king and the king walking beside the horse. Does that seem right? Does that seem natural? Men are men, period. Even the best of men are men at best. But we aren't talking about men as men. We're talking about station in life. Here we've got a king. The one that is to rule over their country, their kingdom. They are to be held in great dignity. And their horse is usually beautified so that it's recognized as the king's horse. And the king wears the appropriate robes to show his sovereignty over the nation. And he rides on that horse. And his head is to be above all others. When people come in before the king, they are to bow so that their heads are not above the king's head, because the head of the nation is the king. I remember that there was a incident under the last administration where our president actually bowed before another dignitary. As the head of this nation, he has no business bowing to another dignitary. Again, a foolish moment where we see somebody bowing as if he was a servant to another country. So this is the most unnatural thing that this should be. In Proverbs 30:21 and 22 says, for three things the earth is disquieted or upset, or if there's a tumultuous situation here, three things which the earth is disquieted, and four for which he cannot bear, or it cannot bear. For a servant when he reigneth, and a fool when he is filled with meat. You see, when you put a servant in the king's saddle, who's ruling? Is it the king or the servant? There are many, and I can't say in every example, or nor am I looking for specific examples, but there are people who are behind the scenes that control the king or control the president. And when they do that, then the servant is ruling over the king. It is the servant that's in the saddle and not the king. It is a very unnatural and undignified thing when that happens. And why is that? Because of the foolishness of the ruler. The ruler is being a fool. Judges 9:14-15 says, then said all the trees unto the bramble, come thou and reign over us. And the bramble said unto the trees, if in truth ye anoint me king over you, then come and put your trust in my shadow. Now, a bramble bush never rises to the height of a tree, does it? It's just a low brush or a vine, and a bramble, a thorny bush. The tree said, come and rule over us. know that a happy dog wags his tail, right? But what happens when the tail wags the dog? Doesn't sound right, does it? Not appropriate. And when a king makes a decision by foolish counsel, is then he not bowing to his counselors who are foolish, and he is not wise in his decision making? As a king, he is the sovereign. It lies at his door. Whatever decisions he makes falls upon him and none other. He is responsible for that. Therefore, the decisions he makes ought not to be the decision that is foolish, by foolish counsel. I've seen this as well, and I consider it just as great an evil as the king that listens to foolish counselors, is the pastor that determines what he preaches by the temperament of his congregation. In other words, he allows the congregation to tell him what he ought to preach. I've actually had somebody try and do that, not here. But they told me, he says, Pastor, you can preach on anything you want, just stay out of our backyard. It's like, in other words, my preaching, I'm somehow supposed to keep that from being personal. Does not the scriptures tell us how to live? Are we not to preach what would be a godly walk? And if that gets into your backyard, then maybe it's something you ought to repent of, right? But when the pastor is dictated to by the people and the temperament of the people, that say you can't preach on certain things, don't preach on sin, or don't preach on this. You could, in fact, I've had somebody sit in my office. He goes, "Preacher, I'm not going to tell you what you ought to preach on." He's not a member here. So I'm not going to tell you what to preach on, but, you know what but is? It's a contrasting conjunction. But, I'm thinking you ought to preach on this. And I just smile, because you can tell me all you want what you want me to preach on, but I'm not listening. Why? Because I have somebody else to listen to. That is the Lord. And I am to preach what the Lord directs me to preach, and not what you feel that I need to preach. That's why I make it clear when I come to a church. I have the freedom to preach whatever the Lord lays upon my heart. And I'll not be restricted by the opinions that exist among the membership. Because it's my job to preach all that God has given me to preach, because it's needful for the brethren. So that's some of the foolishness that we can find. Let me see some potential danger in verses 8 through 10. It says, "He that diggeth a pit shall fall into it, and whoso breaketh an hedge, a serpent shall bite him. And whoso removeth stones shall be hurt therewith, and he that cleaveth wood shall be endangered thereby. If the iron be blunt, and he doth not whet the edge, then must he put to more strength, but wisdom is profitable and direct." There's some potential dangers in here. It's not saying these things actually will happen, but there are dangers here. And the proverb presented here is not of things that will happen, but potential or possible things that can happen as a result of, for instance, dangerous employment. Men today often are employed in dangerous jobs. There are jobs that carry great risk to them. A wise man who is an electrician is going to be very careful and make sure power is turned off and things before he does any work. But one who says, "I want to take a shortcut," and starts working with live wire may find himself in a rather difficult situation by shocking himself or others, or causing injury or damage, because he did not employ his trade properly by making sure there was no power. So a man for a king or a boss or anybody like that, if they are not careful, can run into dangers. If we in our employment as the king does something foolish, it can end up in a rather difficult situation. The sum of these four clauses is certainly not merely that he who undertakes a dangerous matter exposes himself to danger, but the distinction between wisdom and folly. A wise man knows of the dangers, and he avoids the dangerous situations or minimizes them so that he does not find himself in trouble. It's the distinction between wise man and folly. The wise man is everywhere conscious of his danger and guards against it. He knows there's danger and he guards against it. Wisdom has just this value in providing against many dangers and difficulties which everywhere undertaking brings along with it. There is dangers, believe it or not, there are dangers in being the pastor of a church. Did you know that? Do you think Satan likes godly men who serve in churches? Do you think that how many, and you know this personally, how many pastors have been taken down by a woman? By innuendo, by false reports, by accusations. There are all sorts of things that Satan will bring against a godly man, or any godly man as far as that's concerned. But we're talking about one like a pastor, to bring him down. So he must be very much on his guard in the things that he does. I appreciate Brother Israel. Whenever he goes and he picks up one of the young ladies, he doesn't go by himself. He takes somebody else with him so that there could be no accusations against him for doing something inappropriate. And this is the way that we need to guard our lives to protect ourselves from those sort of things. The first thing we come to, though, in our text, verse 8, is he that diggeth a pit shall fall into it. Now, we're not just talking about a ditch digger. We're talking about a man who is a trapper. He is one who, the pit is a pit trap. It is a hole that's dug in the ground, and it's covered over, usually on a game trail. Sometimes it's baited, sometimes it's not, and it is left for unsuspecting prey to run along and to fall through. That type of a trap has been used for many, many, many years and in many countries. And the aspect being is that while checking his traps, the fool forgets where he built the trap. And what happens? He falls into it, right? He falls into his own trap. That's what verse 8 there is about. He that diggeth the pit shall fall into it. A wise man, a wise trapper, will mark where his traps are. Either he will do it on a map, or there will be landmarks. You know, a lot of times trappers using spring traps and stuff, they have a trap line. A lot of times they'll tie a red ribbon or some kind of a tape to identify where his trap is, because sometimes traps get covered with snow and other things and other debris. But they usually mark the trail. They know where the traps are set. They have a map as to where it is. And so there's no forgetting, not falling into his own trap. But the foolish man, the foolish trapper, the foolish king will fall into his own trap that he dug. Then we find, whoso breaketh an hedge, a serpent shall bite him. Now a hedge is usually grown for a couple purposes. One is to create an enclosure. So you would build a hedge to create some kind of enclosure. It could be the enclosure around your home. It could be around a garden. The Bible speaks of a garden enclosed. It could direct foot traffic so they won't cross it. People won't cross across your nicely manicured lawn, but the hedge there directs the path that they want you to go down. it would become the home of various small animals. Usually in a hedge, you'll find tiny birds in there. You might find insects, and it provides shelter and protection for many small animals. It's a source of food, but it can also provide good hunting ground for venomous snakes. I believe in Oklahoma we have about 7 kinds of venomous snakes. And if you're a landscaper here in Oklahoma, no doubt you have run across 1 or 2 venomous snakes in your pursuit or in your job. I think as an Oklahoman, you will know that when you go out and you work along hedges and things of that nature and piles of leaves, that you are going to be cautious and very aware that there may be a snake there. And copperheads are very, very good at blending in among leaves and other brush. So you want to be careful. At least a rattlesnake, if they're not molting or shedding, they will generally give you a warning. But not so of the copperhead. They don't have little rattles on the end of their tail. So you'll be very careful in the things that you're doing. A wise landscaper knows and should always expect to run across a snake. Either breaketh down a hedge, there's a risk you might get bit by a venomous snake. Now, a hedge, thinking of it in the way of boundaries and protection, if you're going to be breaking down a hedge, getting into other people's business, that's a dangerous thing. The wise man stays out of other people's business. A fool, guess what he does? He puts himself right in the middle of it. Proverbs 26:17, he that passeth by and meddleth with strife belonging not to him. In other words, it's not his argument, it's not his problem, but guess what? He inserts himself into it. It says it's like one that taketh a dog by the ears. How would you like to take a dog, a snarling dog that wants to bite your head off, and try to hold him back, just holding on to his ears? You think that's going to make the dog even more angry? Yeah. I don't think you're going to be successful continuing to hold him back. We need to be careful and not be foolish when dealing with hedges. Now, like the man who says, stay out of our backyard, listen, I just preach the word of God. If it gets in your backyard, that's the Lord breaking down the hedge, not me. I'm not trying to meddle in your business. I'm just trying to preach the word. I never take a sermon and focus it at any individual in the church. I never preach against a person in particular or what I believe the sins are of a person in particular. Never do. And I have seen pastors that do that, and there is no question in the mind of the person or persons or of the congregation who that preacher is talking about. And it is a shame, a terrible shame, when some preacher does something like that. Just preach the word. You let the Holy Ghost do the application part of it, working in the hearts of individuals, rather than you try to be the Holy Spirit and try to make application to an individual or individuals in the assembly. Now, if there's a problem in the church, I'll address a problem, not to a particular individual, but to the whole church, because that's appropriate. Anyways, this says, whoso remove a stone shall be hurt therewith. This would be the quarry worker. He works in a stone quarry, cutting and removing stones used in the construction of buildings. Now, such a worker is in danger of injury by falling rock, right? Or it might be rock chips being flung off as they hammer and chisel and try to separate and drill. So there's all sorts of ways in which one could be injured by way of rock. when the king builds infrastructure, he must wisely discern the best use and the wise purpose for the city. In other words, when the king gets up and decides how to build the infrastructure in the city, he needs to know how that building is going to fit together. There is foolishness that can be illustrated in this. For instance, I hate to bring this up. You ever heard of the California rail system? That they have spent billions on, and they have not even got close to completing it. It's just one of those projects that has cost the state government millions upon millions and billions of dollars. And another one that I saw was the game overpass. You guys remember seeing that in the news? So Gary has, they built an overpass. The idea was so the cougars and stuff could cross from one side of the freeway to the other side, and they have spent millions on it, and guess what? It doesn't go anywhere. It's not complete. It doesn't go from one side to the other. And they've got, I think it's only got, they had the middle section, they haven't connected the ends, and it's like silly, foolish, wasting of money. And it hurts the people. Then it says, he that cleaveth wood shall be endangered thereby. Now, I don't know about you folks, but as a boy, I remember having to go out and cut wood for the house because we had wood heat. So we had regular axes, we had double bit axes, we didn't have an automatic hydraulic wood splitter. We actually did it by hand. We had mauls and wedges. And you hit that wedge into the wood and then chop it up. Sometimes were big pieces of wood like that. Sometimes they're small and will split easily with an axe. The bigger ones you usually might use a maul to do it. But there's always a danger of wood flying. Splitting wood and having it fly and being hit by it. Or what happens when you swing and you miss? Guess what's next? Your feet, if you're not careful, if you're not wise in how to handle your axe. Or you could break your axe handle by missing the wood, and the axe go on the other side, and the handle hit the wood itself and break it. Anyone who's experienced bringing in wood for the winter knows the potential danger of saws and axes and the wood itself. So how we handle ourselves, we need to be wise in the things that we do, the directions that we go, because the remedy for all the problems is wisdom. And that's what he's talking about. We'll get into verse 10 next week when we pick up from here. If the iron be blunt, he do not whet the edge, then he must put more strength. For wisdom is profitable to direct. All right, let's be dismissed then. Father, thank you.